really had an enjoyable time talking to this guy the last few months because I miss it. And thrilled to have here on the Rich Eisen Show after the draft we've been talking about is my buddy, former general manager of the Raiders and, of course, a longtime NFL Network guy, Mike Mayock. Good to see you, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great, and a shout out to you and the crew, man. I'm not sure the people at home understand the preparation from not just the guys you see on camera, but everybody. That's why I love Stump the Truck.
Ah.
Um, you give those guys a break. You probably do over 20 hours on air in a 3-day period, and I don't think people understand what a task that is. And to pull it off the way you guys did was awesome, man.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, when you were in the draft room for the Raiders, you chose someone specifically to stump the truck. Mike, did that actually happen? Does my memory serve? Did that actually happen, Mike?
Not only did we draft a guy, but we stumped the truck. It was pretty cool.
You did. And I'll be honest, again, you're still a tone setter for all of us on that set and for NFL Network. Mike, I'm serious. I think of you all the time about let's give the kid his due, that it's his moment, right? And there's a lot of stuff that could be going on, and we will have our fun, and there's time for fun, but that these are moments that are dreams being realized. And I literally had that thought in my head from you when Cam Ward got selected. It's very rare to have that be in your head when the first overall pick is getting selected. But when the first overall pick is getting selected and he's walking down the hallway as Cam Ward was doing, and T-Man, our producer, gets in my ear and says the Jaguars are on the clock. And it's just like, okay, wow. So the trade that we've been waiting for or could happen just happened. It's earth-shattering. It's monumental. It's clearly for Travis Hunter. The Browns are not taking him. They're trading out. The Jaguars are moving in. But this is the first overall pick in the draft, and it's Cam Ward's moment. And I thought of you because if I'm sitting here now talking about Hunter and the Browns and the Jaguars, this is his moment to hold up the jersey, and it's got nothing to do with Cam Ward. So we're still taking our cues from you, sir. It's the truth.
It's funny because I think back to going to the Indianapolis Zoo 4 times in the fourth round. Drove me up a freaking wall when the small school kids getting drafted for the Colts in the foot. And I'm like, we got to talk about this kid. It's the biggest thing in this.
You're saying if we go back to that ape one more time, and I think Charles Davis goes, it's really going to orangutan, Mike. Like, so yes,
and by the way,
but it's true.
By the way,
that did happen. It's funny.
You guys just played the clip of the Boise kid.
Oh yeah,
and
right.
That underscores what you're talking about.
Right.
And as I listened to the clip, because I was a 10th round pick. People have no understanding what that's like. And what he said towards the end of it, well, and I wrote it down. I just want you to believe in me. And that's what you're looking for. If you're a first round pick, everybody believes in you. But it's your big day. Somebody believed in you. And I think it has to be celebrated.
Mike Mayock here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's start off the review with obviously the biggest drop that I can remember. I can't remember somebody having potentially a top 5 grade on him for some evaluators of note, and he winds up being a 5th round pick. What's your assessment of Shedeur Sanders drafting, Mike?
Yeah, this is a hard one for me because I've never met the kid.
Right.
And at the quarterback position, that's critical. So let's start with the evaluation. I mean, my evaluation of him, and I told you on the air, was I had a similar grade and a similar profile as I did with Bo Nix a year ago, but I had a 2nd-day grade on Bo Nix. Okay. Kind of feel the same way with Jackson Dart, kind of a 2nd-day grade. Quarterbacks typically get pushed up a little bit. It wouldn't have surprised me if Shedeur didn't go in the 1st round, but not to go on the 2nd day kind of blew me away. I don't know what happened in any of those meetings. I don't know what kind of presentation he put on or didn't put on. At the end of the day, it's what you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago now. That's in the rearview mirror. It's what about the fit? And there were some rumors, Rich, that he might be going to Philly as he was sliding. And I thought, wow, what a great place for him to go. Jalen Hurts is the starter. He could fit in there. They have such an infrastructure for development that he could literally hide in plain sight and learn how to become a professional quarterback. And now he goes in the 5th round to Cleveland. And, Cleveland hasn't exactly had a reputation for developing drafted quarterbacks. But here's, to me, the conundrum or the intrigue is I believe in the intelligence of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. I also believe in their new offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, who I've known since he was the quarterback himself at Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And I find it intriguing. Okay, what about the fit? Well, they took Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. They've got Joe Flacco, who's 40, Kenny Pickett, who at this point is a failed 1st-round pick. So on one hand, you go, yeah, well, they took Dylan Gabriel and they're 4 quarterbacks. On the other hand, I go, wait a minute. I don't know how they're going to appropriate reps in training camp, and I don't know how this is all going to work. But, Kenny Pickett's making $2.6 million guaranteed. Joe Flacco's making $3 million guaranteed. The other 2 are on rookie contracts. They can do whatever they want here. It doesn't matter. You got an opportunity to earn a job here. And, I had a higher grade on Shedeur than I did on Dylan Gabriel. Now, if they all get an equal opportunity, I'm excited to watch all 4 of them. I know what Joe Flacco is. And Joe will probably, regardless, he could take the first snap of the year, but he'll be on the roster as a backup. I'm excited to watch the other 3 kids get at it because all 3 of them are kids.
I mean, I don't know how they're going to do it, right? So which is I'll go here with this next one. From the general manager position, what's more challenging, conducting a quarterback search with 4 guys on the roster, 2 of them rookies, or James Gladstone figuring out what this plan is for Travis Hunter and sticking to it, where coordinators are going to be grabbing at the kid saying, I need you in my room, I want you in this room. Obviously, the coach is going to have something to say about it, but this is a roster we're talking about here, and you're filling out a roster, and you got to figure out, do you need another wide receiver? Do you need another corner? Or you're trying to figure out a roster in Cleveland here. What's a bigger challenge, Mike? What do you think?
First of all, talk about brass balls. Okay? I mean, James Gladstone is like 34 years old, and he looks like he's 11. Okay? He's from the Les Snead School, which is a growing tree of general managers, along with Brad Holmes. And they have a little bit of a contrarian view, which I find refreshing. And I actually wish I was more open and aware of. So this kid in his first move ever as a GM goes from 5 to 2 and takes perhaps the most transcendental football player in the draft in recent history. And I think the entire Jacksonville fan base has been energized. And, he gives up a 1st-round pick next year. But if you're coming out of the Les Snead School, they do that all the time. They trust in their ability to draft and develop. So I find the whole thing fascinating, first of all. Second of all, is how do you use them? That comes more to Liam Cohen and his staff now. Okay. And I'm sure James and Liam have had a lot of conversations, but you got to pick a side that's going to be the primary side of the line of scrimmage. I come from the school that I think it's harder to find elite corners than it is to find elite wideouts. And I also think it's easier to develop a package of plays for a wideout than it is for a corner. So from my perspective, I'd rather spend the majority of time on the defensive side of the ball and get a package of plays to get him touches every game. The flip side of that, from some people who I really like and respect, they're like, If this guy scores touchdowns at a rare clip, that's what the game's all about now. It's all about offense. So he's going to be a receiver first, and we'll figure the defensive side out. So I'd be fascinated to be a fly on the wall to hear the conversations in that building about how they're going to play him, how much he can handle mentally, which they're going to have to figure out. And apparently he's a brilliant kid. He doesn't smoke or drink or have any of those vices. So I'm fascinated to see how they're going to feed him to get the most out of him and to make Jacksonville a better football team. People talk about Shedeur Sanders and that story. I'm more captivated by the Travis Hunter story.
Mike Mayock here on the Rich Eisen Show. Which drafts leap out at you? Which ones you go, okay, that checks a lot of boxes, that handles business, whichever one. I know I'm going macro with you here. You go for it.
And it's kind of like, I respect the hell out of teams that know who they are.
Okay.
That philosophically have they know. You've heard me talk about the Baltimore Ravens forever.
Right.
And it's for a reason. When Ozzie Newsome was there, they knew who they were and they knew how they were going to draft. Eric DeCosta was in the building with him all those years, and nothing's changed. So if the board dictates, they'll move up. They're not afraid to move up. If they have a chance to move down and the board dictates, they move down. But if the board's falling their way, they have the patience to stick and pick. And at 27, they get Malachi Starks from Georgia, who smells like a Raven. And I knew from about October that he was going to be a Raven. Okay?
Yeah.
He's got an edge about him. He loves ball. He can play nickel and safety. Mike Green, they get him at 59. I had him at 15 to Atlanta. He had the off-the-field stuff. So there's an asterisk there. But he's a big-time player. And Emory Jones, sitting there in the third round at 91, if he doesn't start this year because he's got some developmental components to his game, I think he's going to start the next 8 to 10 years at right tackle for the Ravens. So I look at that group of guys, and as you go down, there are guys like even in the 6th round, like Longer Beam from Rutgers, Peebles, the defensive tackle, undersized D tackle that's a Ravens draft. I love that. And then I think somebody who's developed a similar identity, and for 30, 40 years they had none, is the Detroit Lions, right? I look at the Lions and go, okay, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they know who they are. They get Tyreek Williams at 28. A lot of teams thought he'd be available late in the 2nd round. They take him late in the 1st. Love his play. My favorite player, and one of my favorites in the entire draft, is Tate Ratledge. In scouting parlance, we call him a dirtbag, okay? And that's said really lovingly, because he's one of those guys that when the whistle sounds, he might nudge you around a pile. He might spit some tobacco on you by mistake. He's the kind of guy that you love him as a teammate, and you hate him when you have to play against him. He played through injury this year, just like a Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes guy. And this next kid, Tesla, most people thought that he was a 5th or 6th round pick. Brad Holmes went to the Senior Bowl, had never seen tape of him. The first drill he saw was a blocking drill, and Tesla was bullying defensive backs and linebackers and laughing at them. They weren't happy with him. So what does he do? He goes back, he watches the film, loves the special teams. He moves up from 102 to 70 to pick a guy, and gave up 2 third-round picks next year to get a guy that a lot of people thought was going in the 5th or 6th round. And my point to you is not, some people might say that's not smart. You're not maximizing value. What I would tell you is they're getting exactly the kind of kid they believe in their building. They do it every year. They don't care if it's the Campbell kid a year ago, the linebacker from Iowa 2 years ago. Everybody said, oh, you don't take an off-the-ball linebacker. And they're like, the hell with you. We're taking our kind of guy. So Baltimore is a club that's done it for 30 years, and Detroit's a club that with 2 new faces in the building have completely changed who they are.
Well, then let's also, while you're on a roll here, Mike, talk about a guy that I know you like talking about. Howie Roseman did it again, man. I mean, Jahad Campbell at 31, it was one of those moments on our set where we're just looking at each other, we're shaking our heads because he did it again. Like it's Obi-Wan Roseman, where and the number of draft choices he already has next year are remarkable. He's already got, I think, a 1, 2 2s, and 3 3s for next year. And this is the defending Super Bowl champs who are already getting stronger. I don't know how he continues to do it. And I'm wondering what's the general sense of how it's done with him, Mike?
Ooh, that we don't have enough time for that, but I did tell you, I think before that, in his first go around with the Eagles, um, Chip Kelly came in and ended up getting ultimate power in the building. And Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, sat him down and they said, how do we get better? How do you get better as a GM while you don't have the power in the building this year because of Chip? And they sent him around the world meeting with soccer teams in Europe, GMs in the NBA, all kinds of different places to get a different thought process than just the way he came up through the Eagles organization. And then when he ultimately regained power, this is a brilliant guy that understands salary cap way more than most GMs. He's open to feedback from his people, and he's typically ahead of he's a contrarian. He's ahead of everyone else when it comes to where the league's heading. And the whole league, 5 years ago, I said this league, we've become such a pass first league. What's the defense's reaction? Well, they're getting smaller and quicker. So what does Howie and the Eagles do? They run the ball more than anybody else in the NFL to win a Super Bowl last year. I think the guy's brilliant. I think he did it again. He tried to get up to get Campbell at 22 or 23, apparently. Couldn't make the trade with the Chargers. And gets Campbell, who I had number 9 to New Orleans. I had this, and because of some injuries, he slid. Howie's like, yeah, we got no problems with the medical. We're good. He gets him at 31. They get the safety, Makuba from Texas, who's a really good player at 64. And then Rich, he traded down in the third round twice from 96 to 111, okay? Which is about 15 or 16 picks, the equivalent of half a round. And with those 2 trade downs, he picked up 3 extra draft picks, 2 this year, 1 next year. Look at those 6th round picks there. Miles Hinton and Cameron Williams. They're going to go to University of Stoutland this year.
Nice.
Okay. And there are 2 talented dudes. This Cameron Williams kid jumps off the tape, but he's lost. Like, he doesn't have balance, has a lot of habits he's going to have to break. But between the 2 of them, trust me, Stout's going to turn at least one of them into something special. And I believe the Eagles did it again.
And, he might have, Roseman, gotten Shedeur Sanders drafted by Cleveland. The general sense is that he was going to go and grab Shedeur, and Cleveland said, let's just use our final 5th to go jump the line. I mean, that was the general sense of it. What is just the philosophy of taking a rookie quarterback late when you've already got your quarterback situation handled clearly, and knowing that if this kid does play, it's potentially bad news for you? Not bad news for the kid, but Kyle McCord drafted there, right? I mean, there's other guys who are taken, like Quinn Ewers, bless him, man. I mean, he's there in Miami, where clearly it's possible to start a playoff game based on the way of recent history there. Well, what is the general sense of a lot of these teams that you see on the board grabbing quarterbacks late here, Mike?
I think there are a few things, Rich. And I mean, if you go back to Pete Carroll, when they signed a quarterback to big money named Matt Flynn, who just kind of had a whisper of success in the NFL. And the same year that they signed this kid to big money, who's going to be their quarterback, they drafted a kid in the 3rd round named Russell Wilson. And a lot of teams in the league looked around and go, wait a minute, why'd you do that? And a lot of teams believe that you ought to be taking a quarterback every other year and be intentional about the most important position in the NFL. And, let's face it, San Francisco, they move up to get Trey Lance, yet take Brock Purdy in the 7th. Thank God. Right? And I think the way teams look at it is that as you get into day 3, and if you've got some draft picks, you always want to have at least one young guy on practice squad. Okay, so you can typically cut a younger quarterback on final cuts and get them through to your practice squad. And that's how you learn about the kid. Now, is that somebody you want to keep and develop typically as a number 2? Because that's part of the thought process too, is we might not be drafting a starter, but it might be a cheap an inexpensive way to get a hold of a backup and get him in our building and figure out who he is.
Before I let you go, you got a good story of you calling a player when you were the GM and memorable for you, where you're like, hey, your dreams come true. We just started talking about how we always talk about it when we were on the air, but you were you were finally on a business end of making that call. You got one that stands out to you, Mike?
I enjoyed making them. I thought Coach Gruden was the best I've ever heard at doing some of those, and he did a lot of them. We did some together, but often I just handed him the phone and we had to get on to the next pick. But
right.
I remember talking to Hunter Renfrow, who, again, he had a baby face, and I couldn't believe we just drafted this kid. He's 5'11", 183 pounds, and looked like he was a balding 11-year-old. And I got him on the phone, and he was all fired up, and I was all fired up. And I go, you know who you remind me of? And I think he thought I was going to tell him a famous wide receiver. I said, you remind me of Doogie Howser. And that's when I understood there was a generational gap.
Yeah. That's funny, man.
He was just quiet. He's like, huh?
What was it like when you called Max Crosby? What was it with him?
Max was awesome. We both talked to him. Yeah. We both talked to Max on the phone. What was cool was Max related a story back to us that he had told his dad the night before that he was going 106 to the Raiders. We had one of the early picks in the fourth round.
Right.
We actually had 106 and 108. And I got a bunch of phone calls the night before because teams wanted to move up to 106. And I told them all, no, we're holding on to 106, but I'll move 108, which we did. 106 was for Max. So when he got on the phone, he was talking about how he knew he was going 106, how fired up he was. When I got him in the building, I closed the door, just him and I, and we talked about a whole bunch of things because we had a serious conversation, Rich, because he had some off the field stuff, obviously, that came to light.
Right.
And we ended up being a small part of getting him help after his rookie year. But we had a real serious conversation when he was in the building, and I consider Max a good friend now. And what's amazing, Rich? Just you touched on it earlier. I still get text messages every training camp from some of the kids we drafted, and they're on different teams now, a lot of them, thanking me for believing in them at that point, which kind of brought a tear to my eye when I saw that Boise kid and that clip you had. It was pretty cool.
You're the man, Mike. You are the man. Thanks for the draft insight and everything, and you make me smarter as always. A total blast.
I had a blast, Rich. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, come on, man. We're BFFs. That's best friends forever, Mike. You take care of yourself.
Thanks,
we'll chat again soon. That's Mike Mayock, everybody. Everybody check out he and his daughter Lee and the Believe podcasts on the fun. Eagles. And, I love talking to Mike. Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.